Welcome to the Big Brown Gadfly. This is another transmission from the Baptist underworld, I guess you could call it, or the underground, the real Baptists living life the way that the London Baptists were living in the mid 17th century. I am joined today by whistleblower extraordinaire David Bumgardner. Hello, David. How are you doing?
Hey, Bobby, great to be with you tonight.
Yeah, I have been. He has been a guest on this show before. Now, um, let me start out by saying I am the Big Brown Gadfly, El Tábano de Atenas. You can follow me on. Let me give you a bunch of places where you can follow me real quick. It's in Spanish because I'm trying to get my program up in Spanish, but it's going to be Bobby Tábano and all these different sources. You can follow me there. But let's get right to the show right now. David is joining me really under very joyous circumstances because he and I think, had an impact. A couple months ago, we got together and we decided, okay, hey, you're on the left, I'm on the right. We've kind of been sucked into our own little black holes. And we see a lot of bad personae, out there. And we decided to try to join whistleblowing forces over the objections of both of our respective camps. And we put out some things that got a lot of views. It started a lot of buzz. And lo and behold, Adam Greenway, the president at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, resigned about 2 weeks ago, correct? Okay, so
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Bumgardner, can you just give us the thumbnail sketch? What happened? Who is Adam Greenway? And what does it mean that he resigned? Was he fired or did he resign?
Yeah, so I'll kind of give our viewers the Cliff Notes version. A couple of weeks ago, my former employer, strangely enough, broke the story that Adam Greenway had tendered his resignation to the executive committee of Southwestern's board of trustees. So Adam Greenway was the 9th president of my alma mater, Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. You can actually see my degree on top of my my bookshelf back here. And so I graduated with my BA in May. So I am an alumnus, and I really enjoyed my time at Southwestern. Bobby was actually my Latin professor at one point in time, and those were the days. But Adam Greenway had been, to put it simply, running Southwestern into the ground. And there were a number of things that had happened over the past couple of years. And Bobby and I will get to that here and discuss some of the things that happened. And one major thing that happened that really kind of served as the nail in the coffin. But Adam Greenway was basically forced into resigning the presidency. I am convinced that had he not resigned, the full board of trustees would have been called on and he would have been relieved of his duties. And it really was a cowardly way to go out, because by resigning, Greenway was able to get, by some reports, an approximate 6 months of benefits as part of his severance, and a total package at around 6 figures, which is just astonishing. But that's a little bit of a sketch for our viewers, and we could talk about all kinds of things that Adam said and did. Man, Bobby and I, we would have stories for days.
Yeah, we would.
That's kind of what we're looking at. Yeah,
I think. Well, let me start out by saying I think. Well, first of all, Adam Greenway became a lightning rod for different reasons to different people. My main objection to him was managerial abuse. I thought that it was very unchristian the way that he handled the seminary. He fired people in ways that were inhumane and almost sadistic, in my view. And what really bothered me was the fact that everyone in the Baptist world said this is business as usual. This is how Christian organizations operate. Someone comes in, they fire all the people who were left from before. They pointed to what happened in the conservative resurgence, and they said that's what happened when the conservatives took power. They fired all the liberals. And it took me a while to really piece this together and say, you know what, I don't care if it's right or left. It's just wrong. That was the issue that I had with Adam Greenway. Other people had an issue with him. They felt that he was taking the seminary in a woke direction. And while I would say that was mostly just corruption, he was chasing where he thought the money was. And I didn't think that he really was trying to advance a woke agenda. I could see those people's concerns because these were conservatives who want to protect the theological orthodoxy of the denomination, and they saw that he was compromising on a lot of things. And then you had people on the left, I would put you in this category, who were really disturbed at the way that he handled the sex abuse issue, and in general, the fact that he had come into power saying that he was going to correct all of the inequalities and all of the abuses that were laid at the feet of the former administrator, Paige Patterson, but then he was engaging in basically the same behavior. So have I gotten that right? So there was a lot of reasons why people objected to him, and I think this is a significant event because it's so rare that you actually have whistleblowers bringing things to the public and you see a change happen. I do not rejoice at people getting fired, even seminary presidents, but this was a necessary thing to happen, because if this had gone on any further, basically the message given to the public would be that Baptist institutions are beyond repair. They can't self-correct. So I think it was very good that he was out.
No, Bobby, I think that's right. And, I do want to mention to our viewers that I certainly wouldn't consider myself a liberal by any stretch of the imagination, although it is the case that you and I did not vote the same way in 2020. And anyone who Googles my name will know that I voted for Joe Biden in 2020. And that's okay. People are still kind of upset with me about that. But
okay.
You bring up a good point in pointing out to our viewers that really the criticism and the observation of the corruption and the abuses did come from the proverbial, kind of both sides. So I think that's really insightful. And I think your analysis and your comment about the conservative resurgence and kind of how that kind of whole history kind of ties into this paradigm is really insightful. Really, the nail in the coffin for Adam Greenway was the firing of David Allen, which is really remarkable given the fact that you, Bobby, had actually gone public in 2019 about your firing. And so I feel like the two of us deserve a medal at this point, because we told people Adam was firing people. We told people Adam was a narcissist. That he was enabling and covering up abuses. I mean, just a few months ago, one of my friends who had been sexually abused on Southwestern's campus, I drove up from my home here in New Orleans to Fort Worth to help him file a police report. And we filed a police report with the campus police on Southwestern's campus. And then a few weeks later, I get a letter from Southwestern's legal counsel saying that they're not going to give me a copy of our police report. So just astonishingly wicked and secretive and worldly and evil tactics to cover up wrongdoing and abuses and destroying people's livelihoods, firing them, forcing them to sign non-disclosure agreements, having a campus police that won't give victims copies of their own police reports. So I certainly don't rejoice at anyone losing their job. I care about the man and his family, but you're not going to see me have any sympathy for Adam Greenway. Adam Greenway got exactly what was coming to him.
Right. And I think the whole issue of David Allen being the nail in the coffin is, on the one hand, it's cause for rejoicing, because in God and his graces, he showed us that even though the little people are ignored after a while, if you continue to abuse the little people, you're going to end up driving. Evil exposes itself through God's providence. So that's one thing. On the other hand, it is unfortunate that it took the firing of David Allen, who is, for the people who don't know, he's a celebrated scholar. Everyone liked him. The firing of David Allen was, in my mind, of the same pattern of how he had fired dozens and dozens of people. I mean, we're talking between staff
54,
and faculty.
54 is my number, by the way. Yeah.
50, right. I don't think it's 45. I think it's closer to 54. Yeah. And then you have all that staff that lost their jobs. Certainly, he did the exact same thing to all of them. But the fact of the matter is that once David Allen was fired, then all of a sudden, people had license to be outraged. And all of a sudden, there were the big donors who were really disturbed. And I don't know how to feel about that, to be honest with you. I don't know whether we should look at that as, wow, this is a great thing, because, we were able to expose evil in such a timely manner that when the David Allen firing came, we certainly laid down the evidentiary groundwork for people to look at that and say, okay, this guy is abusing his power. But on the other hand, think of what would have happened if people had acted upon the intelligence 3 years ago, because it was 3 years ago, over 3 years ago, this is in April of 2019, that all of the faculty were called into that conference room on the campus on Seminary Hill, and they were fired in that sadistic manner. And I can tell you a little bit about how that went. I talked about that a little bit with Micah Sample, but certainly I put in a resolution to the Southern Baptist Convention in May of 2019 for the meeting that took place in June of 2019 in Birmingham. And if people had acted on these things early on, a lot of suffering could have been averted. And I think that you wouldn't be in the situation right now. Right now, the seminary is in the Humpty Dumpty phase, because the kind of abuses that Adam Greenway undertook have placed the seminary in a position where it's going to be impossible to put it back together again, because he scattered this world-class faculty to the four winds. He brought in all of these nepotism hires who were his friends from a different institution, Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. And what do? You can't fire all the people who moved to Fort Worth and give everyone their old jobs back. But short of doing that, there's no way to put the seminary back together. So, I mean, what's your reading on the whole thing?
Yeah, well, I have a couple of thoughts, Bobby. The first thing is that, reports indicate that Southwestern is anywhere between $6 to $12 million in the hole. I personally think the number is probably closer to 12 than it is to 6. But here's the thing: we don't know. Now, O.S. Hawkins, who is now senior advisor to the interim president, David Dockery, he led Guidestone for several decades, basically scandal-free. He's universally respected by just about everybody in the Southern Baptist Convention. He's a bona fide conservative, had a stained glass window in McGorman Chapel at one point in time before Greenway took those down and shipped those off to Liberty University. But that's a conversation for another time. But O.S. Hawkins, universally respected. I would not be surprised. Now, I don't know this for a fact, but I would not be surprised if O.S. Hawkins is getting his Guidestone folks to come in and perform some kind of audit, just because they have no idea really what the true state of the school's finances are, which is really, really disconcerting. And as an alumnus, I'm deeply alarmed. I'm not a Baptist anymore, but I spent 5 years of my life at Southwestern. I love the city of Fort Worth. I'm a Metroplex native, was there all of my life. My beef, for the record, for our viewers, it was never, me and Southwestern. It was me and Adam Greenway and his associates. So I love Southwestern. I'm gonna support David Dockery and O.S. Hawkins. I'm an alumnus. I'll always be an alumnus. The ink on my degree is not going to change ever. But the school is in very, very poor condition, and it is shockingly just mind-blowingly amazing that they don't know the state of the finances. So that's my first thought. My second thought would be with regard to the personnel issues that you've mentioned. Greenway certainly was not doing himself any favors firing a Southern Baptist statesman like David Allen. And so you mentioned the goofy white guys from Southern Seminary who came in and replaced actually all of the minority faculty who have been appointed by Page. As a matter of fact, there was an African-American man who was the dean of the music school. And if my Southern Baptist history is correct, he was the first minority dean in the history of the Southern Baptist Convention. And he got axed along with others. And he was replaced by
two white guys who can't sing. I mean, that was I mean, I was pointing out the racial issues. I'm talking like October 2019, ages ago. I got myself blacklisted by the people surrounding yours and my favorite Christian radio host who told everyone not to work with me because I was being a radical and I was bringing up racial issues. But Capstone Report, much to the credit of my friend Alan Atchison, they did report on the minority hiring, and that made it into the Inside Higher Education. That they reported on that at the time. But yeah, it just got buried, and even the people who usually take an interest in those things, they didn't want to pick it up. They let it go for a long time. I think the finances is very disturbing. In 2020, during the height of the COVID lockdowns, I was publishing in American Thinker. And I remember my friend, Michelle Schacht, telling me, wow, you keep on wanting to disturb the peace. And I said, you know what? I don't feel called by God to let it go just yet.
Yeah.
Because I think that what's happening at Southwestern, it needs more light. So I continued to draw attention to it. So I wrote
Southwestern ended up taking $4.5 million from the federal government at the height of the COVID crisis in 2020 as well.
Yeah. And I wrote about it at the time that he had called a special session of the trustees. And they gave him special clearance to be a carte blanche to get into the endowment. So now we really don't know, because in the end, he fired all of these administrators who would have been the check on him prior to that. One of the biggest firings, I can't believe that this happened without more comment from people, was toward the end of 2020, Randy Stinson resigned. That was towards the end of 2020. Am I getting my timeline right?
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was toward the end of 2020, and he basically came forward and said that he was a drug addict going back several years, which means that Adam knew that, he should have known that there was an issue with this person. And certainly the provost's behavior when Adam came and brought him there in February of 2019 was disturbing, the way he was firing people. We can get into that. These are warning signs that could have been acted on years ago. That's why I don't agree with what your editor, Mark Wingfield, said, where he said, maybe this is a sign that the trustee system is working. I just think that there is such a thing as too little, too late. And
I agree.
Yeah. And this is really, it's too little, because firing Adam Greenway is not going to really just solve the problem by itself. There's got to be some massive structural change. And too late is definitely, this is an instance where once Stinson was fired, and once a lot of the other administrators was fired, I don't think there was enough continuity of staff to be able to get a grip on the money. So when they say they don't, I think no one knows how much money they are in the hole, because I don't know how much of the balance sheet is involved with money that was in the restricted endowment that probably wasn't supposed to be taken out, but they gave him this carte blanche and he took it out, probably used it for things it wasn't supposed to, and now they don't have anywhere to put the money back in. And then those donors,
so then eventually trustees begin to catch wind of this, and I'm sure that there was a meeting and a conversation was had, and Greenway probably said something to the effect of, everything's going to be okay. Just give me a little bit more time. And, Bobby, you got to think that the trustees just kind of sat there and thought to themselves, we've heard this song and dance before.
Well, yeah, this is everything that the whole picture that was painted of Paige Patterson when Adam Greenway came in was a milder version of what Adam Greenway became. In my mind, every complaint that I heard about Patterson when Adam Greenway came in, and he tried to blame, Greenway tried to blame Patterson for absolutely everything. And I think they're still blaming Patterson, and it's 4 years later.
Oh, no. Adam blamed him on the way out. If you read the press release from September 22nd, when Adam announced his resignation, he said, I failed to appreciate the legal and reputational and financial challenges that being here home at the Dome has presented to me. That is a load of malarkey. Maybe Adam could have gotten away with placing blame at Paige's feet for like a year, maybe even like a year and a half, give it like 18 months. But there has to come a point where you just have to man up and just face the challenges. And Adam certainly did not do himself any favors by firing faculty in the name of conserving the budget, and then hiring people to fill the positions to fill the open positions that he had created by firing the old faculty. If you're going to fire people in the name of saving money, don't hire their replacements. He's a walking contradiction. It didn't make any sense.
Right. And I think that this, from a Christian's point of view, this is the problem. It began with that was the first big lie that he told. The first big lie that he told was that he had to get rid of so many people. We could go down the list of all of the people, all of the wonderful faculty: Justin Buchanan, Mark Taylor, Mark Jansen, Leo Day, all of the people in the counseling school. Remember, all of
the Archaeology Institute, the philosophy program doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah,
The preaching school doesn't exist anymore. The preaching school is now under the School of Theology. I mean, they ran the school into the ground academically, financially, reputationally. I don't see how Southwestern recovers from this.
Right.
This may actually be a situation, and I had a conversation with an SBC insider the other day. This may be a situation where, for the first time in the history of the Southern Baptist Convention, the executive committee has to step in and bail out an entity, kind of like the federal government bailed out, GM and Ford and all the like during the great financial crisis, 2008 and the years following. This literally may be a situation where the executive committee has to take money from the cooperative program and allocate it specifically to bailing out Southwestern Seminary. Otherwise, there may not be a Southwestern Seminary anymore, which is just stunning to think about.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if there are discussions about selling the real estate.
That's definitely happening. Yeah, my old house in Carroll Park is probably going to be the first to go. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, they probably are going to have to start doing things like that. I mean, I think it all began with the big lie, and then once you tell a lie that big, saying we don't have any money, and then you're hiring people at very high salaries, and this is one of the reasons why it disturbs me that Hawkins not the president. Instead, we have Dave Dockery, who was one of those hires that came in on a very high salary after all these other people had been fired. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know, but it remains the fact that he, in terms of Adam Greenway, made public statements did not have enough money to keep on staff, and then he hired Dockery at a very high salary in addition to other people. So the dishonesty was wrong. I do want to ask you.
And Dockery, go ahead.
Oh yeah. Well, I just wanted to ask you about this one point. What do you think how does this fit in with the larger issue of sex abuse in the Southern Baptist Convention? Because I know that people are talking about David Allen as the straw that broke the camel's back, but I have a suspicion that the work that you did actually may have been the straw that broke the camel's back. Because your reporting caused the FBI to get involved. Obviously, there was massive legal liability. There were people online who were accusing you of lying, and then when you produced all the documents, they had to scrub all their tweets, which to me meant there's a legal liability in the offing, and you know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
So, because it's a mutual friend of ours. I do think that I'm not sure if the David Allen firing would have blown up as much if it weren't for the fact that in this current environment, with the lawsuit over the sex abuse coming down the pike, all of a sudden, not only was Southwestern involved in all these problems, but on top of it, now they're moved over into the column of what they were supposed to be reacting against. What's your reading on the role of sex abuse, and what does this mean for sex abuse survivors in the Southern Baptist Convention at this point?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bobby. I would firstly encourage all of our viewers to go check my byline at Baptist News Global. If you just type in my name and type in Baptist News or BNG, you can see my byline. I penned probably about a 3,400 word editorial back in June detailing the story of one survivor under the Adam Greenway administration. This is a personal friend of mine, and I shared his story. So the victim is a male, and he is a victim of same-sex abuse. And by the way, that's something that hasn't really been addressed as much in the current kind of survivor discourse. And I stand with all survivors, but and so I don't mean that in a negative or derogatory way or to discount the work of other survivors of different forms of abuse, but particularly same-sex abuse in the seminary environment is not something that's really been on a lot of people's radar, and it's something that needs to be. So I would encourage our viewers to go read my editorial.
Jump in real quick. And I think it should be because the Catholic history tells us that it's going to be there. There's a long history. The seminary environment is very vulnerable to same-sex abuse, same-sex harassment, grooming, all those things. So I think it has to be part of this discussion. Anyways, continue with what you're saying.
Yeah, no, sorry, Bobby, your connection was breaking up just a little bit, but I got you back. So I didn't quite hear what you said, but you are right. The Catholic history does indicate to us that we do need to take same-sex abuse seriously. Now, with regard, though, to everything that has happened at Southwestern and things that are potentially coming down the pike, it is worth mentioning that just a few days ago, it was reported by my former employer, Baptist News Global, that the anonymous woman who is suing both Paige Patterson in his personal capacity and Southwestern Seminary as a whole has filed for a summary judgment. Listen to this. This is really important. They have filed for a summary judgment in part because it has been found out that Southwestern lied to the court by withholding evidence and saying that documents and video testimony did not exist. And then when they were confronted with its existence, they finally gave over the evidence. And so a motion for a summary judgment has been filed. And if that summary judgment is issued, that is an automatic loss for Southwestern, but just ipso facto, which is just astonishing to think about. And I want to point out to our viewers that if you have been following kind of the things that I've been saying these past few months, if you recall, Southwestern wrote a letter to the Attorney General of Texas to prevent my friend and to prevent me from getting copies of our records. I, for instance, had a voluntary witness statement. A video of that voluntary witness statement was taken on a department-issued cell phone. And in their letter to the Attorney General, the Southwestern Legal Counsel said that no such video record exists. Well, luckily, I had recorded my interaction with the Southwestern police, and if you listen to the audio that I released not too long ago, you can actually hear the officer say, yeah, they got rid of our body cameras. We record witness statements on cell phones now. And Bobby, I'm not even kidding. You can hear him hit the button and hear the phone beep. You can literally hear when the phone starts recording me. But they said in this legal brief to the Attorney General, oh, we don't have a video of David's witness statement. Just a load of malarkey, a blatant lie. And there was egg all over Southwestern's face when I released that audio and proved that they did have a recording of me and they were lying about its existence. So I just want to point out a pattern here. Even though this lawsuit is related to things that happened under Paige Patterson's watch, it is incredibly important to note that this lawsuit was brought forward in 2019 when Adam Greenway was president of Southwestern Seminary. And I know for a fact that Southwestern's legal counsel has lied about the existence of records, has not brought forth evidence that they have, all to protect the cover-up and the abuses that have taken place, not only in the past administration, but in this current one as well. So again, even though this lawsuit relates to wrongdoing by Paige Patterson, it is the case that Southwestern's legal counsel, under Adam Greenway's direction, has lied about the existence of records, not only to me, but to an actual court of law, which is astonishing. So it just demonstrates that there is a systemic, fundamental problem in all of the entities wherein institutions lie to protect their own, and oftentimes will use the defense of privileged information and freedom of religion under the First Amendment, and that should not be the case. It should not be allowed to happen.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I want to point that out, that one thing I think that has to be focused on in the aftermath of all this is the abuse of this religious liberty argument, because everywhere in the conservative world, religious liberty is the phrase that's thrown out there. I'm writing a whole book on how family values has been replaced by religious liberty. But if you look at the way that it's employed, it actually is a legal dodge to cover institutions, because this is exactly what happens. Southwestern claims that they can't be investigated because they're a church. And somehow all of their decisions, even if they're racially discriminative abuse, even if they're lying and committing fraud with the money and nepotism, and just they're grossly incompetent, nobody is entitled to question what Adam Greenway did, because he was a religious leader, and this was a church, as if he was the Pope or something. And that is really wrong. And I think the Southern Baptist Convention has to take the lead. I want them to take the lead in ending this line of reasoning that somehow religious liberty is the way for Christians to go forward. We should not be concerned with an institution like Southwestern losing its 501c3 status or going bankrupt. Okay, that does not represent Jesus Christ. If they did abusive things and were irresponsible and they lied to people, then they should pay the same consequences. That's where Romans 13 comes to play. Okay, but you'll notice that they always want to quote Romans 13, the famous part, church in Rome, that people should authorities. They love to tell the people at Southwestern that when they have to put up with all their professors getting fired, they say, obey the existing authorities. I remember students saying that their pastors were telling them that to shut them up about the fact that their music professors were getting fired, right? But they don't want to take that seriously to themselves, that, if you are doing things that are not beholden to the word of Christ, like lying, like discriminating, like abusing the people under you. Christ said how to be a leader, and this is not it, right? Then I don't think that I think you should obey civil law. And if you lied, you should just have to pay up for it. And on the topic of lying, when I got fired, I recorded those things, the conversations. I kept all of the transcripts, and thank God for the enemies within the church group, because they published all of that. And Southwestern still published a press release lying, and they still went and they told all of my students, or not all, I can't say all, but they told a large number of my students these lies. I had really been a problem, and all this stuff, and you look at that, and he was able to get away with it because this religious liberty argument, I think, has distorted our community's understanding of how to run things.
Well, and this is not just a problem at Southwestern Seminary. My good friend Will McRaney is involved in this very battle right now,
Right.
because the North American Mission Board has essentially claimed First Amendment protection, even though they slandered this man and libeled him and got him fired from his job. And the NAM and the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission petitioned the Supreme Court to get involved, and actually lied in a brief to the Supreme
Right.
Court and said, oh yeah, we're a church, and here's how this works. There's this hierarchical structure, and they work for us, when anybody who knows Baptist history knows that is not the case. And so just last week, the former chair of the Department of History at Baylor University. So, we're not talking about some sort of right-wing, nut or
Right.
conspiracy theory. We're talking about the chair of the history department at Baylor University filed a legal brief as an expert witness to this court that is taking up the McRaney case, and basically argued that there is no historical ground or even theological or doctrinal merit to the claims of these entities claiming that they are entitled to legal benefits as churches, this ecclesiastical abstention doctrine and this, that, and the other. But that is not the case at all. They are entities, and their sole members are actually the messengers that meet at the annual meeting. But that's a very technical discussion for another time. But the point is, these entities should not be able to claim that they don't have to be transparent or face liability for lying or slandering or denying the existence of records because they're private religious institutions, and therefore all that information is privileged under the First Amendment. That is patently ridiculous, and anybody with half a brain knows that the First Amendment does not protect religious institutions from being responsible for the harm that they've done to people.
Right, exactly. And my thing is, I don't want to hear right-wing religious leaders say, you've got to give us this religious liberty protection, because otherwise the woke people are going to come and take away our tax status. If you're lying about how much money you have, pay up, because obviously you're liable for it. And I don't want to hear left-wing religious leaders say, oh, we've got to stop the Trumpy people from taking over. I mean, run things correctly, run things the way that the Bible says that a Christian organization should be run. And ultimately, unless you live in a society that is grossly dishonest and where the laws are completely immoral, then if you're running it correctly, you should be able to hold up to scrutiny under the law as well as scrutiny under the ecclesiastical structure. And that's one of the problems here. Where do you see, just kind of shifting gears for a moment, where does the seminary go now? I mean, what would be the only way? Okay, so let's lay out the possibilities. One possibility is let it burn. Okay, it will crash. They'll set up the real estate to be auctioned on the open market. It will cease to be an entity. I don't think if they liquidate it and then transfer all the money back to the cooperative program, that's not going to fly. I don't think, because too many people are watching what's going on, and that means that they're just going to give the money to Southern and Al Mohler gets it. And that is just going to start a civil war in the Southern Baptist Convention. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is they just wait for everyone to stop paying attention a year from now, and then they go back to their old tricks and they kind of reach out to some foundation that'll give them tons of money to push some either pro-Trump or pro-left-wing, one or the other, some kind of theology, and then they'll justify their existence that way, get lots of money. I don't know how they can put this back together again. And what are they going to do about all of the people that are circulating in their orbit here in DFW who have all been fired by them and who just have no end of negative comments to say about the seminary? Where do they go?
Well, so I think the trustees, and this is a conversation for another time, but the trustees bear just as much responsibility for all this as Adam Greenway does, by the way. And by the way, that includes the current president of the Southern Baptist Convention, because he was part of the trustee board that hired Adam Greenway. But we can talk about Bart Barber another time. But the simple fact of the matter, Bobby, is that they face an insurmountable task. But if anybody can do it, if there is anybody in the Southern Baptist Convention who can do it, O.S. Hawkins can do it. So I am cautiously optimistic that they will be able to begin to sort of, kind of, maybe slightly get the seminary to something that sort of, kind of, slightly, maybe perhaps resembles health. So you eat the elephant one bite at a time. But I will say this. I think the tandem of Hawkins and Dockery was a really wise decision by the trustees, because here's what's going to happen. Dockery is going to, Hawkins, he's going to shake the trees. So he's going to come and get, all of his longtime traditionalist SBC donors with a lot of money to, give gifts to Southwestern and help them turn this thing around. So Hawkins will shake the trees. And then Dockery, he's going to rake the leaves. He's going to get things in order, handle personnel matters, the day-to-day operations of the seminary. He's probably going to have to fire a few people for misconduct. That'll be a conversation for another time, but there are pretty substantial allegations out there about certain faculty and staff members, but we can talk about that another time. He'll handle personnel matters, and he's just, warm, gentle. His age is appealing, and he's able to connect with people. So I don't think that it's too incredibly far-fetched to think that there could be, in the beginning stages, talks of attempts to reconcile with people who have been burned by Southwestern. You got to think that David Allen is going to be on top of the list. But Bobby, honestly, you and I are probably too controversial to make it onto that list. But that's okay. We'll hold out hope. But I am cautiously optimistic that Hawkins and Dockery will be able to begin to restore some of those relationships and get the seminary at least on a pathway to health. It's going to be very difficult. It's not impossible. If anybody could do it, it would be those two, just two men universally respected in higher education and in Southern Baptist life. But we'll just have to wait and see. But I am agreed with you, though. Things cannot continue as they cannot return to business as usual, and that's on the trustees. That's incumbent upon the trustees.
Yeah, I mean, I think partly, I think the smartest thing for the Southern Baptist Convention could be to just cut it loose. Honestly, I know that sounds extreme because it's the second oldest seminary, but it has shrunken to such a small size, and it has such a toxic situation. And you're saying that you and I are too controversial. But I'm like, if reconciliation doesn't mean you reach out to all the people who let you abuse them, and then, throw them a bone. That's exactly what they did all the way up to the firing of David Allen. They kind of would give a little bit of a payoff to the people who said nothing. I think that you do have to reconcile with the people that were hurt by it, But you're right. I don't see them doing that, and so I don't think that if they continue as they are, there's no way that they can regain their ground. I mean, Enemies Within the Church was a film that I go to conferences now and I see people from around the country who have watched that movie. So Southwestern played a central role in that movie. Adam Greenway himself wrote a letter to Mid-American Baptist Theological Seminary trying to ask them to censor the film. That got reported on the Daily Wire. He inserted the seminary into this controversy that is national, and it's not going away. It's not like you can do what Adam Greenway did and pretend like all of them who saw that movie just are going to do a data dump or something. It's not. And you face a huge challenge, because in this climate, how are you going to recruit students who want to go to seminary? And how are you going? I don't know. How are you going to be able to keep it afloat? The money is going to run out eventually. And
so I think if Southwestern is going to get back on a pathway to health, it needs to find its niche. And historically, Southwestern Seminary has been the traditionalist, conservative-leaning, flagship seminary. There was a reason it was called the crown jewel at one point in time. It was the largest seminary in the world. How the mighty have fallen, to quote from scripture. It's just remarkable. So I think, and O.S. Hawkins in his messaging has been very wise. And just in his tweets these past few days, he's mentioned wanting to get the seminary on the course to being a conservative, stalwart, and this, that, and the other. So I think there's wisdom in that. So if in fact Southwestern is going to recover, there needs to be reconciliation with those who have been harmed. And I for one am holding out hope that I will get a hearing eventually. It's probably going to take a few months just because of all the stuff that needs to be done. But I think if I were to reach out, there could potentially be a willingness to meet. And I'm moving back to DFW here very soon, and so I'll hope and pray that very well could be a possibility. But on the other side of that, Southwestern Seminary, if it wants to return to health, it needs to be what it has been historically known for, being a school that trains preachers and theologians in a conservative, traditionalist kind of Southern Baptist environment. Southwestern Seminary is not Southern, where it's not a white-collar, refined, Calvinistic, Al Mohler daily briefing at the helm. Adam Greenway doesn't have even a quarter of the charisma that Al Mohler has. So that was Adam's problem. That's what he wanted Southwestern to be, but Southwestern has not been that historically, and is not just designed by virtue of its location, its history, its geography to be that. And so it needs less of the opulent tastes, less of the high Calvinist theology, Louisville, Kentucky ethic. It needs more of the chair of fire, evangelism, L.R. Scarborough, reaching the lost, the David Allen fiery preaching, and the theological reflection. That's really the direction that Southwestern Seminary needs to go if it wants to recover, in my opinion. I think it needs to reestablish itself as the traditionalist seminary.
Yeah, I think it also has to reconnect with its regional identity. It was great that the Southern Baptist Convention has reached out and tried to move beyond the American South. It's great that they've tried to go global. Certainly the Pattersons loved the global mission that the seminary had. But as you said, it ultimately is not going to have a coherent identity if it doesn't remain rooted in the South and the Southwest. Obviously, it's got that name. It has to be a Texan institution, so it's got to be training people who are close to those values and who want those values. Otherwise, it's just not going to be able to compete on a global scale. I think in terms of the curriculum, I think that I would say they should bring back the classical focus that they got rid of with all these things. But unfortunately, there is a huge trend in Christian education towards these fluff classes like meaning, vocation, and flourishing, or worldview. You hear that over and over and over again. And I've realized that people say worldview when they just really don't want to explain, and you can't really teach people a worldview. You have to teach them a curriculum, and then they develop their worldview out of the curriculum. But those trends are common in the Christian educational world, and unfortunately there's a lot of money that's flowing into Christian education now because people are frustrated with the public schools. But I just was talking to people who are in the Christian education space. And I said, here's the problem, PowerPoint that I gave them. If all of these problems are already in the churches, then pulling children, students out of public institutions and putting them in church-led schools is not going to solve anything, because all the same problems are there. And we're seeing that at Southwestern, because I think there was a time when people would send their children, they would, pay the money to have their kids go to Southwestern because they felt like that was protected, it was shielded or insulated from all of the negative influences that were eroding Christian education at a place like Baylor or at a place like Wheaton or Fuller Theological Seminary or Biola, right? They thought that that was a way to protect their children's education. And unfortunately, this is how it's ended. Adam Greenway basically is out, and they didn't stay true to their mission. They went off task, and it fell apart.
It really is. There's definitely a parable in there, and just the curriculum aspect of that, I'm appreciative of. It's actually kind of funny. I remember reading, Calvin and Augustine and Luther and Aquinas, and having all these great, wonderful, great book seminars. And that was actually that was really the beginning of my journey down the Canterbury Trail and into Anglicanism. Actually, reading the Church Fathers and the Reformers, and it was like, oh man, Augustine, the stuff he believed was wild. Doesn't really line up with what the Baptist Faith and Message says, but that's a conversation for another time. But yeah, I'm forever grateful for the education that I received at Southwestern, and I agree. Seeing the changes that have been made on the curriculum and academic level, and even the departmental level, like eradicating the Archaeology Institute. Southwestern had a wonderful Archaeology Institute. People all over the world would come to be a part of it, and getting rid of the philosophy program and eradicating the preaching school and putting it under the School of Theology, stripping David Allen of his deanship. I just really perplexing. And I'm not an academic administrator, don't have any experience in higher education or anything like that. But you just got to wonder, even from a academic society, but even from a political perspective, imagine all of the bridges that were burned in this radical restructuring of the seminary and its program offerings. And you bring up a great point, just in the fact that there are so many disaffected faculty, staff, students, alumni, and it's going to be really, really difficult to repair the damage that was done.
Yeah. Well, what about this theory? Do you think it's possible that this was Greenway's goal? That he basically was sent down there to strip mine Seminary Hill? That's basically what this was. That's
really, so you're saying that he was intentionally sent to Fort Worth by Al Mohler, and Al Mohler's mission was to destroy Southwestern Seminary so that all those Swibbit students would end up going to Southern. That might actually be so far-fetched that it's true, Bobby.
Well, I don't even know if it's Al Mohler. It could be someone else. I mean, maybe he got in Al Mohler's good graces with somebody else's funding. I mean, I don't know, but it just seems like if somebody sent him there, because I don't think he was a one-man show, and I think this is like the Hitler hypnotizing Germany fallacy, right? Where we believe that one individual is so evil that he can get hundreds of people to go along with a completely corrupt act in terms of the way the institution was changed. But it seems like if he was sent there with the goal of undermining the institution and trying to get its resources reallocated elsewhere,
he succeeded.
He succeeded. Yeah, he succeeded. Yeah. Emptying out where did all the money go to? That's what the other thing I want to know. All the money was stripped out. Where did it all go to? I mean, did it?
Yeah. So I know this for a fact. I know that a loan was taken out just a few months ago to pay for faculty payroll. So I don't know what Adam was spending his money on. He's probably spending his money on things like a $15,000 headboard for his master bedroom. That was a testimony that I heard from a blue shirt. Blue shirts are I was a blue shirt at one point in time. I used to clean Adam's office back in the day. It's crazy. I would literally clean the man's toilet. Like he has his own private bathroom in the president's office at Southwestern. I was literally cleaning the man's toilet in 2019, and then 3.5 years later, I helped break that he had resigned from Southwestern. Just really remarkable to think about. It's crazy. God has such a sense of humor. But
did you find the manifesto anywhere? You didn't find the manifesto on a
no
jump
secrets
drive?
or emails or anything like that.
Yeah, he didn't leave his passport at the scene of the crime or something. I don't know. It's just
so interesting,
yeah.
Bobby. It's funny you mentioned that. I actually went to go look at Adam Greenway's Instagram today. He is not in Fort Worth. They literally ran him out of town. So his Instagram today, it was a picture of a grill, and you can tell very clearly in the background that he is not in Texas. I don't know if he's in Florida, Alabama, Kentucky, wherever he is. He is not in Fort Worth. They literally ran him out of town. He was forced to resign, and he is no longer living on the Southwestern campus, which is just astonishing.
Well, who sent him? I mean, because it just sounds to me like he was sent in by some cabal of people, and then they decided he was going to take the rap for all the stuff that he did. And so then he got run out of town. So who's the they?
So the man that you need to be looking into is Danny Roberts, the former chairman of the Board of Trustees, and I think is still the chair of the executive committee of the Board of Trustees. And that's another thing. Jonathan Whitehead has pointed out that the actions of the board should be extolled to Southern Baptists. Like there shouldn't be hires and fires and non-disclosure agreements and these secret meetings of these executive committees so that questions can't be asked about actions of the board. It insulates trustees from accountability to the sole member of the entity. And I would remind our viewers again, the sole member of every Southern Baptist entity is the Southern Baptist Convention and the messengers who show up to the convention every year. So it really is remarkable. But yeah, that's a question for Danny Roberts. Why did Danny Roberts? This is remarkable. Danny Roberts hired the guy, and then 3.5 years later, he basically de facto fired him. And there were other power players involved in that. Word on the street is that Jack Graham and O.S. Hawkins had a meeting at a steakhouse the week of and did the end around Adam and, but Danny Roberts really is at the center of this equation. And so are the other members of the Board of Trustees who hired Adam back in 2019. They bear responsibility in all this too.
I mean, it sounds like, to me, it's Greg Abbott, Texas Republican Inc. That's what it sounds like. It's that.
Yeah, well, and it's funny you mentioned that. Adam had a very close relationship with the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, who, as you know, was petitioned by Southwestern so that they don't have to give me a copy of the police report that I filed.
Wait, so how is he close with Ken Paxton?
Well, so there had been a long-standing relationship there, and there had been a number of legal briefs sent to his office, requests made, exemptions, so just all sorts of stuff. The paper trail is there, and I actually have a part of that paper trail by virtue of literally Southwestern's legal counsel writing a letter to the Attorney General and saying, "Hi, most honorable Ken Paxton, we don't want to give David and his friend a copy of their police report," and that's just one example of many. So I think you're right. It is the kind of like Ken Paxton, Greg Abbott, Republican kind of establishment.
That's what it sounds like. It's what I guess my conservative friends would call the rhinos. It's the GOP donor class. Basically, they wanted this institution for whatever reason, and they needed to squeeze. They just had to squeeze the last couple drops out of it. I feel like it was such targeted destruction because it didn't make any sense. It just doesn't.
Well, and I think it doesn't make any sense. And Bobby, I think that there's a certain sense in which some of this is a lot simpler than it seems. Like I agree with you. There's definitely like a vast and insidious conspiracy at play. And I don't mean conspiracy in like a conspiracy theory. I mean like an actual conspiracy
Yeah,
where
well, I
people
mean,
are
these
working
people.
together to conspire to ruin people's lives and cover up abuse and
Yeah,
wrongdoing.
the Southern
That is
Baptist
objectively the
Convention.
case.
The Southern Baptist Convention is a conspiracy. It's like
Yeah,
they
yeah,
meet once a year and they plan on stuff that they're doing, and they're all secretive about it. And it usually
yes.
involves,
Yeah, but
Masonic.
it is a conspiracy, like to
Yeah,
use the philosophical term ontologically. That's what it is, like at its
yeah,
essence. It's a conspiracy.
yeah.
That is true. But I do think that despite the conspiracy element, a lot of this is more simple than it appears. I have come to, a place of healing and peace and rest in some of this. Still have some things to work through, but I have just come to accept the fact that Adam Greenway is just evil. He's just an evil man. He threatened me in 2021 when I came to him with concerns about how abuse was handled. Bobby, he looked me in the eye and he said, "Well, if you knew what I knew, you would feel the way that I feel. And by the way, we know that there are things in your student file that you're not proud about." Did the same thing to David Allen. Told David Allen, "We've been reading your emails. We know that you said this to Paige Patterson and this person, and you said this about me. And, I've gone back 15, 20 years, and I know I have all this dirt on you." And my theory is just that Adam Greenway is an evil man. And I have had several employees of Southwestern tell me that they honestly don't believe that the guy is regenerate. Now, I'm not going to make a pronouncement on the man's
Mhm.
salvation. If he claims to trust Christ, then I will believe him and I will happily call him my brother. But I think my explanation really is a lot simpler than some of what we talked about. I just think Adam Greenway is an evil man, and whoever sent him whatever plan that party had for Adam's tenure at Southwestern, they got what they wanted, because he has run Southwestern into the ground in such a way that Southwestern may never be the same again.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be the same again. But I do think that the larger problem, because actually don't have such a focus on Greenway himself. What really bothered me was seeing how normalized this was in the
Yeah.
Southern Baptist world. I mean, he did things that were outrageous. I mean, he had the whole thing about taking down the stained glass windows, renaming the streets, removing the marker for the dead dog's grave. All of the,
Yes.
although apparently that's under dispute. I read the Capstone report on that.
Yeah,
So
well,
he did all these
he
things.
did take up the marker for the grave. The rumor was that he dug up the bones. We don't. He probably didn't dig up the bones, but he did get rid of the marker. Yeah, that is true.
Okay, but so all of that stuff, he fires 26. This is like he gets there 2 months later. He fires 26 people, saying that there's a budget crisis. Then he goes spending like a drunken sailor and hiring all these people to replace him. All of the stuff that he did in plain sight, and all of the people, because I was on the faculty side when all this happened, all the people around me, they fell in line. And they said, this is normal. This is a reasonable behavior for a Christian leader to do, because in the church world, this is standard. You come in and you fire everyone under you, and you have to just accept what they did. And as long as people had their own place to go, whether they went to some other small Baptist college in Louisiana or Mississippi or Tennessee or wherever it was, as long as they had their little place to land, they didn't feel that it was anyone's duty to point out what Greenway was doing. Can you tell that I still have these very fresh memories of it? I remember it very, very clearly, because there are people that I preached together with in Texas, who I felt like they were my brother. We were so close, who have still to this day have never spoken to me, because they said, you shouldn't bring up the racism. That that's you can't do it. And so I think the fact that it was so normalized shows that this might be not just an indictment of the seminary. I think this is the evangelical world's problem, that they have to figure out, it's like Quo Vadis, where are we going? How is it that this happened? And for them to take 3.5 years to force him out, to me, that's moving at a snail's pace, given what was going on. I mean, it shouldn't, and they should have done due diligence. They shouldn't have brought him in there in the first place. All they had to do was look at what happened at Lifeway. He was the chairman of the board at Lifeway. Lifeway literally closed 170 stores 3 days after Adam Greenway. Do you remember this? After Adam Greenway, and I mean, it's like, if that is not a big, flashing red sign, and then all of the sex abuse cases that were making the headlines, the Hannah and the Den Hollander and the Jen Lyle, they all took place at Southern while he was a dean there. So
Bobby, I don't know specifics, and again, I would just reiterate to our viewers that I stand with all survivors, but I will say this: I would like to point out that Bart Barber is on the record. So get a load of this. Bart Barber is on the record on Twitter saying that while he was a trustee at Southwestern, he did not want to hire Adam Greenway because Adam Greenway, he knew. So get a load of this. Bart Barber says he knew, he had personal knowledge that Adam Greenway had mishandled one specific abuse case in particular. I'm not going to say that survivor's name out of respect for them, but there was this one particular abuse case in general that Bart Barber said he knew Adam Greenway had mishandled, did not handle properly, had knowledge of this, and therefore he was not comfortable voting to bring him on. But yet, when Greenway came and these claims were brought forward that Adam had mishandled claims of abuse at Southwestern, Bart Barber was silent and didn't say anything.
What was the timeline?
Shockingly hypocritical.
When did Barber post this tweet?
Oh yeah, this was several months ago. I quote
okay, so it was this year.
People's attention. Yeah, it was this year. Absolutely.
It was this. So this was after he was hired, after everything happened, after he fired me over. Because remember, I was fired over writing an article about sex abuse. I mean, I just want people to not forget that. Okay.
Yes.
It wasn't that I was fired because I voted for Trump or I was a Republican, or it was about sex abuse. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, that, and because I exposed the NDAs that was the reason why I was called in. I mean, it's all on audio tape. So what I don't understand is, why is he in 2022 claiming that he was hesitant? I mean, I was there, dude. I was there. I'm sorry. I was, and not only that, I was fairly friendly with Paige Patterson. I was in Paige Patterson's office. I mean, this did not happen. Whatever Bart Barber's talking about, he totally green-lighted Adam Greenway, because they could have kept Bingham on as the president if they really wanted to. So.
And really, Bobby, looking back at it, that's what they should have done. I remember. I don't know if you were there, Bobby, but you were still employed at that time. They had a chapel in McGorman, a chapel service in McGorman, and they said, here's what we're going to do. This is not being live streamed, but what we're going to do is we're going to record it, and we're going to send it to the trustees, and we want faculty, staff, and students to come up to a microphone and tell the search committee what to look for in the next president. And Bobby, I kid you not. So I went to a microphone and I said my piece, and I basically said, if we could hire a man like Jeff Bingham, that would be wonderful. And Bobby, I kid you not, there were 2 or 3 other students who walked up to microphones, and they were recording this and sending it to the trustees. They were sending it to the search committee for the new president of Southwestern. I kid you not, there were 2 or 3 other students who literally went up to a mic and said the exact same thing. Actually, it would be wonderful if Dr. Bingham could be our president. I mean, honestly, I don't know what the trustees were thinking in hiring Adam Greenway. What an unmitigated disaster. One of the worst decisions in the history of Southwestern Seminary, if not the single worst decision in the history of Southwestern Seminary.
Yes. Well, listen, I am terribly sorry, but I am being called away. Oh my goodness. All right. So listen, this was a great discussion, and absolutely. I definitely want to, we'll revisit it. It's great to get an insider's perspective. And I just want to say, publicly to you, congratulations. And
yes, to you too.
And God bless the USA, and we're going to move ahead, and we're going to stay in touch. Okay.
We will.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.